Hello, everyone. We are live here. This is Erin Morgan, the editor-in-chief of Eye Care Business Magazine, and I am excited to welcome you all today joining us to watch our live stream with VSP and Dr. Jeffry Gerson, who is an optometrist with Grin Eye Care in Olathe, Kansas. And welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we are here today to chat a bit about the critical importance of education and training in your practice, especially in today's world. You know, we do a lot of research, eye care professionals responding to our surveys for Eye Care Business, and we have found that the most recent surveys say, especially looking ahead into 2021, education and staff training are some top priorities coming, looking into the new year. So great time to talk about this topic. And Jeff's also going to talk to us a little bit today about how to fit that creatively, because obviously we're all pressed for time more than ever. Practices are super, we have a whole bunch of new demands and protocols to follow. So how can we fit this, into the schedule of an already busy schedule? So this live stream today is part of the Eye Care Business times VSP Global Premier Academy 360 social media takeover. That's today, all day on Tuesday, December 15th. We are thrilled to have VSP Global Premier Academy 360 taking over our social media channels. They're doing on our Facebook page, our Twitter page, and our Instagram. And you can also view this live stream on Facebook and on YouTube. But there have a lot of information up today, kind of, on optimizing the patient experience and just kind of a lot of information there. And there's also some trivia up there and prizes. So, keep joining in for this takeover day. It's really fun and a lot of great information at the same time, and including our live stream today. So just a quick note before we get into our conversation with Dr. Gerson. Folks, as you're watching, please tell us who you are. We love to give shout outs to our viewers. We welcome you to our broadcast. So please tell us your name, your practice name, where you're located, what part of the country, and we'll give you a shout out. Just let us know where you're from. Type it into the comment bars either on YouTube or on Facebook. So a comment bar right below the live stream here. Go ahead and type that in. And if you have any questions for Dr. Gerson along the way, please feel free to type those in, and we will have a dedicated time at the end if we do have any questions that we can answer those. So thank you for all of that. And I'll turn it over with Jeff here. So Dr. Gerson, can you tell us just for background, a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your practice there in Kansas?
Yeah, so I've been in Kansas City where I've practiced for a little bit over 20 years. I've been in a couple really numerous different types of practice settings, and where I am now is kind of a collaborative practice, a group OD MD practice where we have some general ophthalmologists, some specialists, and then a group of us as optometrists. So kind of a unique and fun environment to be practicing in for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. So where is Olathe? Is that just outside of Kansas City?
Yeah, so Olathe is just right outside Kansas.
Sorry,
yeah, that's okay.
I'm obviously not in the know there.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Olathe is just right outside Kansas City. It's basically a suburb. So yeah, so it's a suburban area. We draw on all kinds of different patient types. We have 2 offices, and between our 2 offices, we have, really every type of demographic of patient, no matter how you look at it. So which also kind of adds to being interesting, but also the importance of, you mentioned education, just knowing a little bit about lots of different things, because we never know who's coming, what's coming in the door, and what we're going to be faced with on a day-to-day basis.
It's true. So your staff must have to really be able to, adapt to whoever is coming in the door, whether that's a child or an older person or, a young person, with different needs, certainly, for sure. So obviously, it's no secret that a lot of time and money goes into owning and running a practice, and it really is an entrepreneurial business, endeavor for sure. So we know you provide a lot of training and education to the industry. So how do you prioritize training and education for yourself and for your staff in the practice?
Yeah, it's a good question. And especially now, I would say with dynamics of everything being so different. I think probably the first thing I would say, just in how we prioritize and how we do that, is I think traditionally as optometrists, we think of education being in 1 hour blocks. And I think that especially now when so many things are being done virtually or on online modules, that really finding things that are not an hour at a time, finding things that are 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. And we don't have to learn everything about a topic, but maybe just small little snippets. And so I think that makes it a lot easier to prioritize, because when you're talking about an hour of time, that's hard. But when you're
It's
talking about,
daunting.
yeah, exactly. But if you're talking about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, then it's a lot easier, whether it's for the doctors or the staff or anyone in the practice. It's much easier to be able to justify that kind of time away from patient care or whatever it is that you're doing.
I love that. And it's also kind of like a mental break, right? Let's go do something completely different for 5 or 10 minutes. And then that you kind of get refreshed and then you go back to what you were doing. And it keeps people engaged as well. So I think that's a great idea. I love that concept. I'm trying to do that also with exercise
Right,
right now,
right.
as we've all been so busy. Better to say, I'm going to get 5 or 10 minutes than nothing at all, because an hour seems too daunting.
Exactly. You fit it in when you have time and when you're able, but it's also a lot easier, I think, that way to stay engaged in it. It's hard to stay engaged in anything like this for an hour. 15 minutes
Definitely.
is a much easier, much more manageable chunk of time to be able to do.
That's a really, really smart way to look at it. I love that concept. And we might use that idea. We'll tap into you for eye care business. I think that's an article in the making
There you
for
go.
sure. So can you tell us a little bit about the training and education you provide to other optometrists and their staff?
Yeah. So, historically it's been, like all of us, things were in person and live. And so used to doing that. And so doing things like this concept is new, doing things more virtually like this. But obviously over the last 9 months, I've done quite a big transition from doing live events, or I should say in-person events, to still live, but virtual events like this. And so just doing lots of different things. And like I said, some of them are in small modules where it's maybe only 15 minutes. And some of them are still the more traditional hour long, or sometimes even 2 hours long. But as optometrists, we still need to get continuing education to keep our licenses. And so that's a really important thing that we really need to be aware of, that the live meetings aren't there right now to be able to go to. So we're all having to turn to virtual settings like this to get the education that we need.
That's so true. Yes, it's been a huge shift, that's for sure. So, well, that's great to know. And then, so turning that around, how do you focus then on training for your staff in particular in your own
Yeah.
business?
Yeah. So what I try to do is just find opportunities, because I think that the doctor or owner really, for the most part, is going to be the person that needs to take the responsibility and kind of lead that charge. So finding opportunities for my staff and saying, hey, I'd like you to watch this 15-minute video on something, or could you read this 2-page article on something, and just trying to keep it in small pieces. So that's for the most part what we've been doing with our staff, is just trying to get them to take in new things like that. Obviously, we've had other things that are COVID related that I think that's a little bit different though, and things that everyone has to read or be aware of, but it's still education. So, whether we realize it or not, there's been a lot of education for all of us that has gone on over the last 9 months or so.
It's so true. Yes, it's a very good point. And that 9 months has gone painfully slow and very fast at the same time. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just kind of at the core, why would you say that training and education is so important to you and for your practice?
Yeah, I think, from a doctor perspective, you always want to know what's new. You always want to be on top of the latest and greatest, and know that what you're doing for your patients is ultimately what's really best for your patients. And the only way to do that is through education, whether it's reading articles in a hard copy journal, whether it's an online journal, education. The other thing that I would point out is education doesn't have to just be something that is for educational credit. There's lots of valuable webinars and other things you can attend that aren't for educational credit, but are still very educational. And I would encourage people not to turn away from something if it's not COPE approved, because there's still a lot of valuable information that may or may not be scientific in nature, but maybe it's more on running a business and the business aspects and some of those things that are still vitally important, even though it may not count towards your state license.
Absolutely. And that's a really great idea, concept that just that education isn't only for CE credits, it's for just furthering yourself, your business, giving you fresh ideas, keeping you kind of, up in front of everything. So that's a great feedback. So, obviously everyone is pressed for time these days. Practices have extra demands on them. What challenges do you see today with integrating training into a practice kind of, and then how do you get over that?
Yeah, so I think that, the biggest things, just like in anything else, are time and money. Just the time to be able to do it, which makes the smaller snippets important. And from a, if you want to say from a money perspective, I think there's plenty of free education, especially right now, whether it's for doctors or staff, but time is money. And so having staff doing things on the clock is costing you, money. So I think those are the two biggest barriers, that it's time and money. And I apologize. What was the second part of the question?
Oh, just kind of how to overcome those challenges.
Oh, how to overcome it.
I mean, obviously it's a balance.
Yeah. So, luckily most of the things that are being offered by virtually everyone is free right now. So that really helps with the dollar part of it. But a lot of it's just motivating staff to do some. And because it's hard to get, because sometimes not everyone sees the importance or feels that they need the education. So that I think that's a challenge too, besides the time and money. It's motivation. And really, I think any eye doctor that you talk to right now would tell you that their staff is really kind of overrun, that everyone's so busy and burnt out, and the last thing they want to do is something different. But I think we could kind of turn that around, like to add something in. But I think we can kind of turn that around and say, well, gosh, we're going to give you something different that you can do instead of, seeing X number of patients this hour or doing this or doing that. Let's learn something a little bit different. So maybe trying to turn some of the negatives into positives.
That's really true. And it's also a career advancement tool for them as well, because the more knowledge they have, the more valuable they are as an employee, for sure. So it's a win-win, no doubt. So what kind of tools have you used and utilized to assist you in the area of training?
Yeah. So as far as my staff, you mean, or what have we done? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's lots of great resources that I think that a lot of us may just not be aware of. And so, you can ask virtually any rep that you see that's in your office, and most companies have some sort of training available online. So one example, so VSP is hosting their Academy 360 that has different courses on all sorts of different topics, whether it be actual for continuing education credit. There's some of that for the doctors. There's also not for continuing education for doctors and also staff, whether it's through buying groups like PERC or other buying groups that have recorded webinars that are online. It's just finding these different opportunities. There's so many out there. I would tell you that any instrument that you have in your office, that company probably has education available. And it's something that we should all be taking advantage of, or at least realizing we have the opportunity to take advantage of.
Right, for sure. So just going back then to Academy 360, as a tool, because it's not necessarily obviously like product specific, right? There's a lot of information in there. So kind of what content areas in Academy 360 kind of have been most beneficial to you and your staff on the training front?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on where your staff are in their career journey. And what I mean by that is, if someone has an office with 6 employees, then you may have one employee that's been there or in the industry for 25 years, and you may have another employee that's been in the industry for 6 weeks. And so, and that's kind of tough. And so I think when you're looking for sources for education, It's looking for places where you can go that there's something for everybody, where
Right.
sometimes it's as simple as what's a lensometer and how do you use it. Sometimes it may be about billing and coding for, well, if they have this type of insurance plan, how do we bill it? Or it may be, so something that I just recently helped with that's on Academy 360 is in regards to diabetes. We have a doctor's course and we have a staff course. And so, just different things for different levels. That's what I think is really important, because it's not a one size fits all.
For sure, definitely. So I'm just going to give a quick shout out because we have Nick Sowards here, and he says, great educator and doctor. So thank you for joining us, Nick, and we appreciate that comment. And I'll just remind folks watching, because I know some people may be tuning in kind of halfway through here. So we're just asking everybody, if you're game, please type your name and your practice name or any comments or questions that you have for Dr. Gerson into the comment bar on Facebook or on YouTube on our live stream here. I'll be able to see it right here. And we can give you a shout out or address your question if you folks have any questions on this kind of really awesome and super important topic of training and education for your staff, especially in today's world. So, okay, well, we have a few more questions here, so I'm gonna dig in. So, kind of looking at, just tilting a little bit here to look at education and training successes and tips. How would you say, on a bigger picture thing, look here, how do you define success in your practice? I mean, and that's like, do you have 2 hours, right?
Yeah, right. So if you're saying, how do you define success as far as training and education? I think the answer would be just knowing how to do stuff, and a very broad answer like that, because any instrument that you have is every instrument is different from the next. And does everyone in the office know how to use it? And because that's part of training and education, just knowing which button to press, which screen to go to. And that may sound kind of simple or silly, but it's an important part of running a practice. So I think that's part of educational success. I think that for me, it's when a staff member comes to me and kind of tells me what to expect, excuse me, with the patient I'm about to go into, because they've taken some sort of training, they watched a video, they did something, and they know what something means. So for example, when they do an OptiMap image, and before I go in the room, they come and say, hey, doc, I want you to take a look at this. Is this a retinal hole, or is this? I think that's great. And so I think anytime that staff are able to be more assertive and I guess helpful in an assertive way, that shows me that they've had training, and that the training or education they've gotten has been beneficial for them. They know the questions to ask, and they kind of know the information that I'm going to want or need about the patient.
That's great. Great feedback and advice there. So the next question is also kind of a big question, but I'm just going to couch this in saying, I'm working on our January issue right now, and I've been working on our cover feature that I'm editing to get ready for layout. And we base it's our kind of big 10 trends for 2021, and looking at kind of, we survey, as I mentioned, our readers. It's a huge reader survey. And I'm looking right now at one of our response pages, and it's, what are your biggest challenges? And that's my next question for you, kind of, what are your biggest challenges right now? And I just want to say, because it's just so fascinating to me. It's obviously makes sense, but from our reader research, the number one challenge that they wrote for 2021 is staff training. That's the biggest one. The second biggest one was patient communication. And we have found through our research and through talking with, our readers, that it's really, it's so critical right now. And it's also not something I think a lot of practices have taken the time to do. So, I just kind of wanted to point that out. And then the third one was COVID survival strategies, just kind of how to cope with what's happening right now. So those are kind of the top three that our readers, for you, what would you say, what are your biggest challenges? And that can be within staff training, education, or practice management in general, or COVID, in general, All the above.
Yeah, yeah, it is kind of all the above, and I think they all kind of go together, really, because a big part of COVID is actually patient education, letting them know what it is we are doing or not doing, how are we limiting things, what are we asking of them,
It's
and it's just
huge.
how are things different. And so the patient education and COVID related strategies to me are really one and the same. And it's also staff education in COVID, because our staff needs to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Are we doing that? That we're doing this to help make sure everybody feels and is safe and stays healthy. So I really do think all those things go together. I think an issue that a lot of practices have had has been employee turnover and the ability to be able to hire. And we've had some difficulty in finding employees at certain points over the course of the last year. And when you have difficulty finding people, then that means it's usually going to be harder to find someone with experience, which means then they're going to need training starting at very basic levels, from things that sound so simple yet are important to know. Like I mentioned before, what is a lensometer? What does that do? So I think that's a challenge we have faced and will continue to face. I think for us in particular, we're hoping that come March or April, and once there's been enough vaccines that people are starting to get out a little bit more, and we can maybe start to relax some of our protocols at least a little bit.
Right.
We'll probably be needing to hire another person or two or three. And so
Right.
so we're anticipating that it may not be so easy to hire, and then once we do, it'll require training.
Right. And that's right. A huge endeavor for sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you're addressing those challenges, kind of just planning and looking to the future. Anything else that just in addressing those kind of different areas, the communication, the patient education, are you folks doing it through, kind of email or text or website or all of the above, social media?
We've done a little bit of all the above, a lot of phone calls. So unfortunately, our staff has been really tasked with making a whole lot of phone calls as far as letting people know when we have to change appointments or what our protocols are and things like that.
Sure.
So we've tried to take a very personal touch with it, but it takes a lot of manpower to be able to do it.
It does. But it's so worth it.
I think it is, but it's taxing on people having to make all those phone calls. And I mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of burnout. So I think really probably our biggest challenge in the next 3 to 6 months is going to be employee burnout. And honestly, probably more so than finding new employees, it's to keep our current employees and make sure that they know that they're appreciated and that we don't want them going anywhere. We want them staying. I think that's going to be a challenge, not just for us, but for everybody, because once we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, that doesn't mean slow down. We don't have to work as hard. We probably still work just as hard, but a little bit differently. Right.
Definitely. That's a really great feedback too. There's another article on burnout. So
yeah, it's real. Amazing. It's real. We hear it from employees all the time about it. Hey, I'm tired and kind of tired of, and can't blame them. We all feel the same way.
Exactly. Yep. The burnout is definitely real for sure.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for practices looking to do more with education and training, with all of this in mind? Obviously, everybody's got a busy schedule, burned out employees. I know we talked a little bit about how that can actually be a benefit. Let's change our mindset and just do something different, for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think it's finding, like I said, small chunks. See if you can find things that are 15 minutes and maybe not even any more than that, and try to set aside some time if you have a no-show. And that's something else we're dealing with right now, is a lot more no-shows than normal. And so if you have a no-show and you have a staff person or two that, there's always something to do, but maybe that something to do could be, hey, watch this video for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and learn about it. And then what I'll oftentimes do is if I ask someone to watch something or learn something, I'll ask them, hey, once you do, I want you to tell me something about it. Maybe you can teach me, because I'm certainly not above learning from anybody in the office or from anything. And so I assume that when my staff learns something, that they'll be able to then forward some of that to me. So find time. No shows can be, we all, no one likes to have a no show, but we can turn that into an opportunity.
Right. That's a great perspective. Okay, well, I'll just say I have one more question for you, but I'll say to our audience, again, thank you for your joining us here. If you want to ask any questions, now is the time to do it. We can address anything you have for Dr. Gerson here. He is obviously has a wealth of information, and especially on this really important topic. So please type your questions or any comments you might have into the chat bar there on Facebook or on YouTube. So Dr. Gerson, looking forward into 2021, it's coming fast, and we have a lot of hope for change and things getting a bit better. But it's just to ask you kind of what are you most excited about in general as an optometrist, as a business person, as an educator?
Yeah, I think opportunity. I mean, I think the biggest opportunity is to get back to what we may deem as being normal. I think that's the most exciting thing to look forward to. And I think that I would tell you, and a lot of other people would be the potential for in-person meetings again, not just because of the educational value, because I think there's a lot of value to be had in in-person education, but also just the social aspect of it. I think that's something we're all missing, the camaraderie, and so that's definitely something looking forward to. And I think that eye care will continue to be vitally important because I also think that a lot of people are going to remain working from home long term. And with that, as we know, comes people just sitting, staring at a computer like what we're doing now, that creates different visual demands. And so I think that the visual demands that people have now will continue, and we're in a great spot to be able to continue to serve people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll definitely be an area of need that continues for sure.
Yeah.
So I have one question here for you at the end here, just to tack on. I know we're a little bit limited on time, but one last quick question. So, looking at kind of the whole of staff education, what would you say maybe this is a really tough question, but if you had to pick one area, what's the most important? What are you going to hit first? What's the most important thing? I know.
Well, that's not really
a tough one.
Yeah, honestly, I'm going to take the easy way out and say it's not a fair question. And the reason it's not a fair question is because everyone on your staff is starting from a different place. And
right, and
so
they're two different things.
Yeah, I think it's just too difficult to say this is the one thing, because whatever one thing you pick, there'll be some people that are already quite proficient in it. And whatever one or two things you don't pick, there'll be people that are completely deficient in it. So unfortunately,
that's a great answer because it gives perspective on that. Well, you have to kind of individualize that training. You have to look at your staff and kind of say, okay, who needs what and how are we going to do this? So I think it's a great perspective. Great answer.
Yeah. Now, if you push me on one of the things I would say is from an optical perspective, just making sure that our opticians really know the different types of lens options, the coating options, because those are things that patients are asking about. And so that's one we've had to talk a lot more about the blue light filters and different types of progressives. I think that's something that's really worth getting educated about. And that's something that labs and manufacturers are more than happy to help you with.
No doubt. And the thing is, there's so much new technology out there, and there are so many products that I think that is really valuable to be able to understand how they all work and how they might benefit different people. So, it's not one size fits all for everyone. Yeah. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for your time. And we appreciate the audience joining us today. And this is fantastic information. And I'll email you soon for our articles in Eye Care Business.
The articles that you volunteered me for. Thank you.
Exactly. So it's all really fantastic information, though, and I really appreciate that for the audience. And we wish you a great day, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere soon.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, folks.